Chloe, guess what?
What?
We're getting ready to start a new study this week.
No way!
Yeah, it's on the Beatitudes.
Miss Heather, my mom says I'm not allowed to have Beatitudes.
I don't think that's what we're talking about right now, Chloe, but before we get into that, do you guys want to play a game with us?
It's time to play Cow, Chicken, Pig, the game where you can be a cow, a chicken, or a pig. So stand up and choose which animal you want to be, but choose carefully because if your animal's eliminated, then you are out.
Of sin and darkness, whose love is mighty and so much stronger. The King of glory, the King above all kings, who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder and leaves us breathless in awe and wonder. The King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos back into order? Who makes the orphan a son and daughter? The King of glory, the King of glory, who rules the nations with truth and justice, shines like the sun in all of its brilliance. The King of glory, the King above all kings. Yeah, this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy, worthy. Oh, this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place. That you would bear my cross. You laid down your life. That I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. All that you've done for me.
Oh my goodness. It is so much fun playing and singing with you guys, but Miss Heather, my mom says I'm not allowed to have a beatitude.
Okay, hold on. When I say beatitude, I'm not talking about your attitude. I am talking about a specific teaching from Jesus. During Jesus' ministry, he gave a sermon that we call the Sermon on the Mount. And Jesus was telling his followers and his disciples about blessings. So let's talk about what a blessing is. Chloe, what are some ways that you feel like you're blessed?
Oh, wow. Let's see. I've got shoes that fit really well, and I've got a dog that loves me a whole lot, and I live in a house that's cool and it's got a roof and air conditioning.
Those are great blessings. You could probably keep going on and on and on. And I bet you guys at home can think about different ways that you're blessed as well. That's great. But when Jesus was talking about blessings, it wasn't about what we have, although those, yes, are blessings. But he talked more about what can we give to others. So, well, we're going to go ahead and watch a really quick video about Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. It's going to talk a little bit about the Beatitudes, but it's also going to go ahead and talk about some things that Jesus did after the Sermon on the Mount. Look for ways that Jesus blessed others, and think a little bit about ways that you can bless others as well.
God's story, the Sermon on the Mount. So part of God's story is about a sermon Jesus gave on the side of a mountain and what he did afterwards. And it goes like this. One day, when Jesus saw crowds gathering to hear him teach or see him do miracles, he went to the side of a mountain. It was near the Sea of Galilee, across from a place called Capernaum. From there, he gave a message all about God's kingdom and his love. We call this message the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus started by explaining who would get blessings or favor from God. He said the most blessed people are those who are poor, sad, or humble. He said God shows favor to people who are just or treat others fairly, and people who are merciful or show love to those who don't deserve it. He said the people who are pure, who bring peace, or who get hurt for doing right will be rewarded for their actions in heaven. In other words, the people who love others, even when it makes them seem weak or unimportant on earth, are like heroes in God's kingdom. Anyway, Jesus went on to explain that when we believe in and follow him, it's our job to show everyone else who he is by loving them. That means going out of our way not only to comfort and help our friends, but also forgive people who hurt us, love our enemies, and give to people in need. The thing is, Jesus didn't just talk about love, he showed it all the time. In fact, right after giving this sermon, Jesus spent the rest of the day helping everyone he met. First, as Jesus came down from the mountain, a man with a skin disease called leprosy knelt before him. "Lord," the man said, "if you are willing, you can heal me and make me clean." Usually, no one wanted to be around people with leprosy, but Jesus touched him and said, "I am willing, be healed." Instantly, the leprosy disappeared. Then, when Jesus arrived in Capernaum a bit later, a soldier said to him, "Lord, my servant is in terrible pain." Right away, Jesus said, "I will come and heal him." The officer said, "Just say the word from where you are, and my servant will be healed." Jesus told him, "Because you believed, it has happened." The officer's servant was healed. A little later, Jesus arrived at his disciple Peter's house. Peter's mother-in-law was there too, sick in bed with a high fever. Jesus touched her hand, and the fever left. Later that evening, many other people who were demon-possessed or sick came to see Jesus. He brought relief to all of them. At the end of the day, Jesus got into a boat with his disciples. Suddenly, a fierce storm came out of nowhere. Waves began crashing into the boat. The disciples realized that even though they were in the middle of a giant storm, Jesus was fast asleep. They shouted, "Lord, save us! We're going to drown!" Jesus said, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" Then he told the wind and waves to stop. They did. That day, Jesus taught a lot of people how to love and showed them what love looks like. Whenever somebody took their sickness or pain or fear to Jesus, he helped them. Everybody who met Jesus got to experience his love. And when we love like Jesus, everyone who meets us can feel his love too. And that's the story of the Sermon on the Mount. So, in case you missed it, here's the quick version. Crowds gathered. Jesus went to a mountain. He gave a sermon. He talked about God's kingdom. He told us how to love others. Jesus didn't just talk about love. He showed it. He healed sick people. He saved people who were demon-possessed. He calmed storms. He showed his love to everyone he met. Our job is to do that too. And that's a part of God's story.
Wow, Jesus really did a lot in his lifetime to bless other people. But Miss Heather, I can't do all those things. I can't heal somebody with leprosy or perform miracles.
No, we're not Jesus. We can't do all of those things, but we can bless others. I cannot heal someone who is sick, but I can share a meal with them. I can write them a card, or I can pray for them to get better. There are lots of blessings that we have. The ability to write, the ability to cook, the ability to smile. There are lots of blessings that we have where we can share those things with other people. In fact, that reminds me of one of my favorite stories, Chloe. Have you ever heard of the story called Stone Soup? Have you heard of that story before?
I think so. It's been a while.
We have a gentleman with a very cute bow tie who's going to go ahead and read that story to us. Let's listen to the story, Stone Soup.
I went into my collection of books and pulled out this book for you. It's Stone Soup by Marcia Brown. Here, and then I'll open this up. And this book is actually autographed. It says, "For Elizabeth, a handy recipe, Marcia Brown." And we see this gentleman here playing an instrument and this young girl eating something. Let's find out what they're eating. Stone Soup, an old tale, told and pictured by Marcia Brown. That means she wrote the words and she drew the pictures. And then there's a pot here. It is the dedication. That means that the author has dedicated this book to someone special. And it says, "To my mother and father," right there in the smoke coming out of the pot. 3 soldiers trudged down a road in a strange country. They were on their way home from the wars. Besides being tired, they were hungry. In fact, they had not eaten nothing for 2 days. How would you like a good dinner tonight, said the first, and a bed to sleep in, said the second. But all that is impossible, said the third. We must march on. On they marched. Suddenly, ahead of them, they saw lights of a village. Right there, lights of a village. Maybe we will find a bite to eat there, said the first. And a loft to sleep in, said the second. No harm in asking, said the third. Now the peasants of that place feared strangers. When they heard that 3 soldiers were coming down the road, they talked among themselves. Here come 3 soldiers. Soldiers are always hungry, but we have little enough for ourselves. And then they hurried to hide their food. They pushed sacks of barley under the hay in the lofts. They lowered buckets of milk down the well. They spread old quilts over the carrot bins. They hid their cabbages and potatoes under the beds. They hung their meat in the cellars. They hid all they had to eat. Then they waited. The soldiers stopped at the first house of Paul and Francois. Good evening to you, they said. Could you spare a bit of food for 3 hungry soldiers? We have no food for ourselves for 3 days, said Paul. Francois made a sad face. It has been a poor harvest. The 3 soldiers went on to the house of Albert and Louise. Could you spare a bit of food and have you some corner where we could sleep for the night? Oh no, said Albert. We gave all we could spare to the soldiers who came before you. Our beds are full, said Louise. Now look at this family. Quite a big family, wouldn't you say? There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 people in that picture. Let's find out what happens here. At Vincent and Marie's, the answer was the same. It has been a poor harvest, and all the grain must be kept for seed. So it went through the village. Not a peasant had any food to give away. They all had good reasons. One family had used the grain for feed. Another had an old sick father to care for. All had too many mouths to fill. But the villagers stood in the street and sighed. They looked as hungry as they could. 3 soldiers talked together. Here they are, talking. Then the first soldier called out, "Good people!" The peasants drew near. "We are 3 hungry soldiers in a strange land. We have asked you for food, and you have no food. Well, then we have to make stone soup." The peasants stared. Stone soup? That would be something to know about. First, we'll need a large iron pot, the soldiers said. The peasants brought the largest pot they could find. How else to cook enough? That's none too large, said the soldiers, but it will do. And now water to fill it, and a fire to heat it. It took many buckets of water to fill the pot. A fire was built on the village square, and the pot was set to boil. And now, if you please, 3 round, smooth stones. Those were easy enough to find. The peasants' eyes grew round as they watched the soldiers drop the stones into the pot. What's stone soup without some stones? Any soup needs salt and pepper, said the soldiers as they began to stir. Children ran to fetch salt and pepper. Stones like these generally make good soup, but oh, if there were carrots, it would be much better. Why, I think I have a carrot or two, said Francois, and off she ran. She came back with her apron full of carrots from the bin beneath the red quilt. Remember, they hid the carrots? A good soup should have cabbage, said the soldiers as they sliced the carrots into the pot. But no use asking for what we don't have. I think I could find a cabbage somewhere, said Marie. And she hurried home. Back she came with 3 cabbages from the cupboard under the bed. If we only had a bit of beef and a few potatoes, this soup would be good enough for a rich man's table. The peasants thought that over. They remembered their potatoes and the sides of beef hanging in the cellar. They ran to fetch them a rich man's soup, and all from a few stones? It seemed like magic. Here they are carrying the meat for the soup. Ah, sighed the soldiers as they stirred in the beef and the potatoes. If we only had a little barley and a cup of milk, this soup would be fit for the king himself. Indeed, he asked for just such a soup when last he dined with us. The peasants looked at each other. The soldiers had entertained the king. Well, isn't that something? But no use asking for what we don't have, the soldiers sighed. The peasants brought their barley from the lofts. They brought the milk from the wells. The soldiers stirred the barley and the milk into the steaming broth, while the peasants stared. At last, the soup was ready. All of you shall taste, the soldiers said, but first a table must be set. Great tables were placed in the square, and all around were lighted torches. Such a soup! How good it smelled! Truly fit for a king. But then the peasants asked themselves, would not such a soup require bread and a roast and cider? Soon a banquet was spread and everyone sat down to eat. Never had there been such a feast. Never had the peasants tasted such soup. And fancy, made from stones. They ate and drank and ate and drank, and after that they danced. They danced and they sang far into the night. At last, they were tired. Then the 3 soldiers asked, is there not a loft where we could sleep? Let 3 such wise and splendid gentlemen sleep in a loft? Indeed, they must have the best beds in the village. So the first soldier slept in the priest's house. The second soldier slept in the baker's house. And the third soldier slept in the mayor's house. In the morning, the whole village gathered in the square to give them a send-off. Many thanks for what you have taught us, the peasants said to the soldiers. We shall never go hungry now that we know how to make soup from stones. Oh, it's all in knowing how, said the soldiers, and off they went down the road. Such men don't grow on every bush. And that's stone soup.
That was such a great story. I love the part where the people in the village didn't think that they had enough to feed themselves, but when they all worked together and shared what they had plenty.
And that's like what blessings are. Sometimes it feels like you may not have enough to share, or you know that you're good at one thing, but you don't think that you're good at another thing. If we share our blessings together, we all have plenty. In fact, more than plenty. We have an abundance, and we're able to take care of not only our family, but all of God's family. We can invite other people into that family because there will always, always, always be enough. Thanks for learning about Beatitudes with me today, Chloe. Next week, we'll continue our study of the Beatitudes. Click on the link below and you can find some cool discussion questions for your family or a cool recipe for your own stone soup. You can even make your own version of the story if you want to. We'll see you next week, kids campers. Bye.